Marvel Entertainment. I'd like to thank Victor and the Digital Hollywood team for helping put together this terrific panel. And today we're going to be talking about the consumer, content and services, and the next generation of consumer experience. So we might go across the different topics from video to mobile, social networks, what have you, but I'll always try to bring it back and focus on the consumer. At the end of the panel, we're going to have a roundtable discussion up here. I will open it up to questions. I do ask for our panelists, please identify yourself and what company you're with, if you're a reporter or what have you. I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists, and we'll start off with who's closest to me, Ron. Ron is the Senior Vice President of Sales Business Development for NBC Universal Digital Distribution. Ron was appointed to this position in February 2007. His responsibilities include overseeing the digital sales and distribution of NBC Universal's television content across multiple platforms, including wireless, internet, and emerging digital customers. In addition, he supported the TV networks team with distributing the company's cable network and content portfolio. I also know he was very much pivotal role in the success of the NBC 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, one of the most watched events on TV and the internet. Next to Ron is my good friend Rob Tercek. Rob is the president of digital media for OWN, and he was named that in October 2008. At OWN, he oversees the multimedia ventures for OWN and Oprah.com, and as such, responsible for leading the team that creates and markets multi-platform opportunities for OWN and Oprah.com content. With a strong background in social media, he's charged with spearheading initiatives to build a significant social media presence for the brands. Rob is a seasoned media executive experiencing 2 decades in creating and marketing content on all digital platforms, including cable, broadband, game consoles, and mobile. Next to Rob, we have Greg Clayman. Greg is the EVP of Digital Distribution and Business Development for MTV Networks. In his role, Greg manages digital business development across MTV Networks, working closely with its brands to develop new opportunities for distribution of digital content and to strike deals with online partners. Based in the company's New York City headquarters, Greg reports, you don't report to Meek anymore, he's gone.
No, not anymore, to Rich Hagendorf.
We need to update your bio.
I guess I do.
Who do you report to now?
Rich Hagendorf.
There you go. Where he oversees all the mobile media, supporting digital brands, developing, distributing a wide portfolio of content and applications. Sorry. And then finally, next to Greg, we have Lewis Henderson. Lewis was named the CEO of Davey Brown Entertainment in March 2009, 1 year ago, replacing retiring James Davey, who co-founded the agency in 1985. Prior to joining Davey Brown, Lewis spent nearly 20 years with the William Morris Agency, most recently serving as the head of their digital practice. In that role, Lewis built William Morris's digital entertainment businesses on behalf of the agency's clients across film, TV, music, publishing, theater, sports, corporate, and international. Lewis drove a number of the industry's most notable technology and media partnerships, having counseled many of today's leading companies from broadband, mobile, and video game arenas. And then if Richard joins us, I will quickly, just in case, give you his background. Richard's the CEO of Media Investment Group, an investment advisory and management services firm that focuses on technology, media, and content. In his 20 years of operating roles, Richard was most recently the head of international business development and strategy for Facebook, where he managed the international business development expansion efforts, including exploring global and regional distribution partnerships, strategic relationships, media and monetization prospects, as well as numerous growth-oriented initiatives and operations for Facebook. Okay, so it's going to be very much a round-robin discussion, and I encourage these guys to ask questions of each other. They all know each other pretty well, and each other's businesses pretty well. We're very fortunate to have 3 networks today, and Lewis with his background in the agency and what he's doing today.
And Richard.
So let's start with the consumer. And in the last let's say 3 months, it's one of my favorite questions. What is the biggest consumer lesson you've learned, whether from something you've done or something you've seen on the internet or on mobile?
I can take a shot at that. At Oprah.com, we have this opportunity to engage people on a level that I think is a little bit unique. The audience that we reach is women, and they tend to be women above the age of 25. So not necessarily an early adopter audience. And so it's interesting to see what they respond to. The big buzzword, of course, the last few years has been social media. And we had the premise that if you gave our audience more opportunity to engage with the content, they'd respond. We started to do that, and the response has been tremendous. Our audience wants to project themselves into this brand. They identify with it. And so as we do live events on the web, we have started to open up those live events where Oprah will do a webcast straight from the studio with the show with a guest. We started to open up those events to the community at large to participate. They can post comments. They can tell us what they're thinking. They can send in a question. They can even Skype in via video. And what we discovered is that the audience has a tremendous appetite for this, almost an unquenchable thirst to participate. You'll often hear marketers say that what marketers do is they try to create a conversation, when in fact a lot of marketers, principally on television, they're not really interested in a conversation. It's kind of a one-way flow. What we've learned, the big insight I've had, is that if you do have a conversation, if you truly open it up and make it a conversation, I think audiences that want to participate in a brand will respond with loyalty and enthusiasm and zeal and zest and so forth. So that's been the big insight, and it's been richly rewarded, and we really are going to double down in this category.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you hear a lot about Twitter and Facebook and how that engages folks, and we certainly see that in our programming. Something that I saw when we did the Hope for Haiti Now telethon. With every network here, and I'm sure some of your clients as well, is broadcast wide. The incredible power, and just sort of go off what you're saying, the incredible power that could actually have when you it was the #1 trending thing on Twitter when the telethon was live. It was all over Facebook in significant ways. The notion of how you're monetizing this video, or who has rights to what, everybody sort of took a pass on that, every label, every publisher. And so this thing was being broadcast live. It was alive not just on 50 or whatever was different networks, but also on Facebook and on YouTube and Twitter under the "What Are You Doing Now" had a link to it. It was on AOL, MSN. It basically open to everybody. And what we saw from that, I think every network saw, is it broke every record. I mean, more money was raised. It was over $65 million raised from that telethon. It was the most money raised from a telethon ever. It was the most money raised from an individual public, in a day for that period of time. And it did everything you think it would do, right? In terms of breaking Twitter, in terms of doing all this sort of stuff. And it was incredible. It was absolutely amazing. Of course, then that's over. Right, and then there's you start to talk about how can we monetize this and who has the rights to what, and and everybody has a campaign. But when everybody got together and focused on one thing, it's just incredible the power that they have.
That's a pretty big deal. How many folks watched Hope for Haiti on the web versus on television? Did a lot of folks in the room do that? Yes, so quite a few of the folks. It came together really fast, and obviously because the event occurred, the earthquake occurred. And within just a couple days, Greg and his team were reaching out to people like me to say, hey, we're doing this thing. It's the right thing to do. Would you participate? And the obvious answer is, heck yeah, we're going to do it. What can we do to help? And I got to credit you guys because you set aside all those questions, those gnarly questions of business model. That was set aside, so it wasn't an issue. And what it did was make it possible for dozens of companies to participate in a meaningful way and thereby reach tens of millions of people simultaneously on every platform. It was a very cool thing. It's kind of a sign of the maturing of this business, I think.
It's a good point.
5 or 6 years ago, there would have been kind of a discussion, maybe a debate over rights or issues about that.
Right, and who gets what. Yeah.
We would set all that stuff aside.
I would add just on the brand side that, you've seen a similar trend. Brands are opening up their messaging to the consumer, wanting to hear back what exactly they think about the brand. And in some cases where you see, Frito-Lay or Pepsi, where they've actually asked the consumers to help to contribute to in their branding and their advertising. So I think if you look across in the last 6 months, you've seen a dozen or so brands engage in that in a pretty definitive way. I think you're going to only see more of that moving forward. And I think that also combines well with the content piece as well. So I think you'll see a lot of, I don't think it's exploration anymore. I think people are really, they bought in. They see how this can work, and they're perfecting it.
I'll add an anecdote. I don't know if it was 3 months ago, it might have been more like 4 or 5, but at CNBC, one of my colleagues from CNBC was with me. We launched an iPhone app, a CNBC iPhone app, and it was amazing. And I guess it was intuitive, but if you put what is really a tool, we talk about CNBC content, we talk about entertainment, later, but just talking about news and information and how important a brand like CNBC is to a certain demographic of users. It really is a tool. It's something you sort of have to have if you're really following the markets and you're in the business. And one of the learnings is, I guess not a learning, but a reinforcement of something that a lot of people talk about and we believe in, but you actually see it come to life. If you build and optimize for a very specific use for the consumer and you do it really well, it's amazing how successful something like that can be, rather than, for example, take something and sort of try and shoehorn it into a new platform or a new device, which, most likely will always not be, not be the optimal way to do it. But, it's a great example. If you haven't downloaded it, you should take a look at it. It's a great tool and it's very, very successful. And it's just proof that if you really, try and figure out what that ideal user is looking for and really build to that, and optimize just for that product and for that experience, you'll most likely be very successful.
That's interesting you say about optimizing for a consumer. Rob and I were talking beforehand about relevancy and making content and the service combined relevant for your consumers. Rob, you want to give an example of something that you've seen some success with that?
Well, sure. It's something we think a lot about because at OWN we have this incredible opportunity since we're launching a brand new cable channel from the ground up, and we have this tremendous asset in Oprah.com and this gigantic existing audience of fans that are already there. So we start with this digital presence that's pretty big. That really hasn't happened in the past. Usually in the past, you would have launched a cable network and then you'd sort of scramble to put together a digital media business around it, but it's almost always an afterthought. And that relationship is cast from the outset. When in the past, it was always set up as a kind of ancillary or derivative business. And that didn't serve everybody very well in the past, I think, because as a result, much of the programming on digital platforms would be an afterthought, a cut down, kind of a promo clip, maybe a web extra of some sort, something that had more of a marketing flavor to it than genuine content experiences that were appropriate for a platform. Because we're launching fresh, we can start from the ground up and say, well, okay, how do you serve an audience that's already multi-platform? What can we do from the very beginning? And so we're building into all of our show concepts things that we know already work with our audience because we've already tested them out on Oprah.com with the Oprah Show. So we have a pretty good sense of what they're interested in doing. But the key thing there is relevance. What people are willing to invest their time in on the web, on digital platforms, is where they get a practical result. Now, it can be an emotional result, right? They get joy or passion or fun or, those are valid experiences. But what we also find is that what people want to spend their time with and are willing to come back to repeatedly is where they get really practical, useful information, shortcuts, tips, things that help make their life easier. And this is a little bit of a surprising, I think, result for anybody in the media business because we tend to think of ourselves as entertainment first and utility second. But I think on the web, that utility component can be incredibly powerful. I think that's just the point you were making just a second ago, Ron. And so we have to look at everything we're doing with, what's the emotional impact, but then also what's the utility or the relevance here to this particular audience? Why are we giving them this thing, and how are they going to use it, and will they come back to it every day?
Do you have an example of relevancy of MTV or something? Greg, I'm putting
You
you
know,
on the spot.
one example at the top of my head, we have a bunch of Nickelodeon applications on iPhone and iTouch that do very well. Turns out the iTouch is a great device for little kids. A little expensive, but fabulous device for little kids. And anyone who has an iTouch and a little kid might know. We were talking about that earlier. So you can take your shows and you can put them on the device, and we actually do that through Apple and sell them through iTunes. But when it comes to where we then go beyond that, we are sometimes, I think, surprised by the simplicity of how popular and useful and fun something very simple can be when you're looking at the medium specifically. So, for example, the first one we had was something called the SpongeBob Tickler. It's a little SpongeBob, and you tickle him. And now it makes use of the touch screen. You can cut them in half and shake them around, and you move them back and forth, and it's all the stuff that's real specific to that touch screen and that device does exceedingly well, right? Coloring books, right? Which again, it's sort of like a coloring book on a phone. You wouldn't have done it in the world before the iPhone. Now it's not just the iPhone, obviously. There's other touchscreen devices, Android, etc. But the ability to have a thing, and it's the Dora, we have one for Dora, where you can go and you can color Dora by pushing the button, pushing the palette. I have a 2-year-old, she's all over this. And then we sell more books within the application, right? So it's 99 cents for the app, and then it's 99 cents for each additional coloring book. You get bored of them quickly. Can't get bored of them fast enough, as far as we're concerned. And it's another great one. There's a flute game. There's a shape, or there's a letter identifier that we just launched actually last week for Moose and Z for fans of Nick Jr. But it's spending time with the device and spending time sort of seeing what its capabilities are and experimenting with it and seeing what's out there. And then again, not just taking, this is what you were saying, not just taking our content and saying, all right, after the fact we're going to cut it up and put it here, but with a fresh slate from the start, what's the best thing for this device? What content does it work for? And that's been, we've seen a tremendous amount of success with that approach.
Excellent. Since we're talking about Apple, let me do a quick poll. How many of you guys are first in line on April 3rd to pick up an iPad? Raise your hand. Curious. So we got 50-50. Okay.
Why not?
Why not, Lewis?
See the next version. We'll see the first one come through.
You're waiting for round 2?
Yeah.
I'm with Lewis. I'm waiting for round 2.
I'm going to wait for round 2. I'll get one. I'm just going to wait for round 2.
Ron, what about you?
I carry one device.
You carry one device, and that's it.
That's it.
What device?
My phone and my BlackBerry. That's it. I can't carry
That's
one
2 devices.
It's one device. My phone and my BlackBerry.
You don't have a Kindle?
I have Kindle. I don't carry it.
But this will replace your Kindle.
Then I got to carry it.
Yeah, only in as much as you carry your Kindle.
So let me ask this.
Not that I'm shilling for them.
And you probably can't talk a lot about, because obviously things are coming out. What do you see of this new device that excites you? And we're just talking about how to customize things.
To the point of relevance, so you have to think of if you went to CES, it wasn't just the rumors at that point of the Apple iPad, but the dozens and dozens and dozens of other digital pads of some sort or e-readers of some sort. I literally, from the time I got out of the airplane at the airport to getting to CES, 3 different companies approached me just randomly and said, we can build a device for you in China. Does Oprah want to have a book club reader? I was like, I don't want to be in the hardware business. Why are you guys coming to me? Well, it turns out it's so easy to fly to China and go to one of those custom OEM companies, ODMs, and get a device made. It costs practically nothing. They will do it for you on spec. They will custom build a device for anybody who's got a brand. And so I said, it's cool that you're coming to us, but why aren't you talking to like the New York Times? Why aren't you talking to Hearst or to Meredith, these big publishing companies that have existing print businesses to defend? And apparently they are, although I don't know anything about those discussions. But it seems to me that there's this crazy mad rush towards making new kinds of e-readers and devices. But many of the companies making those devices have absolutely no idea what the customer is going to do. I don't think that's true of Apple. I don't think that's true of Kindle. I think these companies have thought it through. Amazon and Apple have thought through carefully what they're doing. And what they're trying to do is construct an ecosystem that supports the device. So they're already cutting deals with publishers. They're trying to create experiences that maybe extend those brands in meaningful ways. You probably have already seen some of the demos for the Apple iPad with various magazine publishers are showing how you can interact and make a multimedia experience there. So what they're doing is they're positing a customer model where the customer wants more media around their print media. They want a richer experience, and that they will pay, frankly, a lot to get that, because these devices aren't that cheap, frankly, at the outset, certainly. I'm not sure if that case holds up. It's going to be really interesting to see if that's what people are willing to part with their cash for, a richer multimedia experience around what was formerly a print experience. But certainly that's the model that I've heard that's been put out there. I would also say, though, that a lot of the kind of clone machines that are coming, they have no concept of what that customer model is going to be, or the business model around it, or the ecosystem to support it.
I would add, I think Greg said the word simplicity. It's just so key when you look at what Apple in particular has done over the past couple of years, and I'm sure the iPad will be no different. But that's something that it's almost, you don't even need to explain it in words. It's just, one, it's expected from a company like Apple, but there's this increased it's almost like this level that you have to be to in terms of meeting the needs of the end user, and has really raised the bar to such a level. It's amazing that, you know, most people, I think, that have those kind of devices, they just take for granted that they pretty much always work. That ecosystem, you know, complicated word for the average person, but all that means is, you know, it basically kind of works all together, and I don't really have to worry too much about it. I plug it in, and you know, things just appear without me having to really think about it, or, you know, have an IT background. And I think that, you know, it's good because it challenges everyone to kind of think that way and really push the envelope on some of the other platforms that may have historically been a little bit more complicated to use. But I think that halo, you know, and you know, whether or not everyone can really take advantage of that and execute well against that, and then, you know, certain companies can probably do that really well, Apple being one of them. But I think it's a really helpful push for the entire industry to really not, you know, as a secondary thought, think about, okay, well, you know, is this too confusing, or, you know, is this, you know, do we really need a 50-page manual to explain how to use this device? Maybe we can do it a little bit simpler. I mean, I think that's a really positive thing.
I think you'll see too. I mean, you know, obviously Apple's, you know, brilliant, and particularly they're great at bringing something to market that you didn't think you want, but then you die to have it when it's there.
Yeah.
And I think what you're seeing with the iPhone, and for any of those who attended the, you know, Mobile Summit in Barcelona, but you'll begin to see some really stiff competition at the end of this year from other manufacturers, because of what Apple and the iPhone had created and the opportunity in that device. And so it's going to be interesting to see now. Yes, there's been other, you know, tablets that have been out there, but I think they'll once again, you know, be way out in front. And to Rob's point, they're great at kind of creating these applications that people really want, and they understand their consumer. So, you know, just as you saw with, you know, personal computing, and they opened up that business, and then before long it was kind of taken over, but there's still this vanguard within the business. I think you're going to see the same trend.
What interests me, you know, when the iPhone came out, it was different from anything else anybody had ever seen. There was nothing like it, right? And it's been, what, 3+ years now after that. And now we're beginning to see, to your point, there's stiff competition. You know, 3 years between the iPhone and the Nexus 1. I think it's 3 years. There was also a period of time that you know, we sometimes forget, between when the iPhone launched and when the first app was available, right? Because it couldn't buy an app when you launched it, and people saw it, and people, you know, they sort of jailbroke it, and put their own apps on it, and now this ecosystem is developed. What's interesting to me about the tablet world is, and you're right about CES, it was unbelievable. I mean, from the Skift device to the Plastic Logic Q to, I mean, HP's got one, Sony's got them, Dell has a whole suite of them. They're all coming out at the same time. Yeah. You know, and look, Apple's brilliant, and they're going to do a brilliant job, and it's going to be great, right? I mean, exactly what you're saying, and that as compared with, you know, it's not the Apple operating system. It's not exactly Windows 7. It's something a little bit between. You know, it's our flavor of Android. We'll see. But they're all coming out at the same time. And they're coming out, especially Apple's coming out, with an ecosystem of 140,000 apps. Yeah. Day one. Now, they won't all look great. And, you know, I think everybody's trying to develop, you know, as best we can, blind for whatever we think this thing is going to be. But I do think that it'll be faster. You know, in terms of where you begin to see actual competition. I think there will be a robust, you know, market, unless you come in on the side of who needs a tablet for anything, which I know is sort of the counter argument to that. I don't really buy into that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about content on the tablet. So, you know, big deal's been made. There's no Flash support. I know many sites. I'm not sure about MTV. I'm sorry.
A lot of Flash.
You're a lot of Flash.
Yeah.
Are you going to be changing all your content to HTML, whatever, 5, whatever? Or?
You know, it sort of goes back to what we were talking about in terms of developing stuff specific for the device.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, it sort of needs to come out and you see what it can do and not do. But it is, I mean, in terms of the content that I think will drive these things, and I know you're moderating, you're not participating, comic books. I mean, come on. How huge are comic books going to be on tablet devices?
They'll be good.
You got it.
Look at I think it's a safe assumption, just to pick up a point you made, which I think is a really important point. Apple starts in this new tablet, battlefield. It's a new battleground that just emerged. Apple starts with a tremendous advantage because they've got 140,000 applications. And so if you're a developer, you have to make a decision on how you spend your time, right? Developers don't invest money, but they invest their time, which in a way is more precious to them. And so you have to decide, where am I going to invest some effort? If you can invest effort in an iPhone app and hit 2 platforms now instead of 1, well, that's pretty efficient, right? And meanwhile, look what's going on in mobile. Mobile's been a fragmented place for a heck of a long time, really from the outset. Initially because each mobile operator had a very fragmented implementation, and then all the handset companies were doing non-standard implementations. And so you had this terrible challenge of porting across devices. Anybody who spent time in the early days of mobile, as I did for many years, kind of like grinding away at the coalface of this promising opportunity, you spent a lot of time porting, up to the point where certainly companies I worked with were doing 50,000 ports a month if you were trying to be in multiple territories and multiple languages. This is a crazy inefficiency. About half the cost of development was importing. Well, we're going to see that happen in these new platforms as well, because there is no common standard. There is no standard implementation. Apple's decision to go away from Flash is just one illustration of that. So you'll see each device requires you to do some customization or some porting, and that's cost. And so then each developer or each content company is going to have to make they're going to have to make their own decision about, is that the right place for me to invest my time and energy, or is there a better platform? If you're familiar with the game industry, game companies have been making this decision every time a new platform is introduced, which is generally in a 4 or 5 year cycle. And it can make or break a platform. Whoever's successful at getting developers to line up around their platform ends up with critical mass. Apple, therefore, enters with this tremendous advantage because they've already got a bunch of people developing for iPhone, and all that stuff's going to show up on day one. It's going to immediately make the Kindle look, I don't know, out of date. Is it fair to say that? It's it's black and white. It won't have all these groovy applications. It's going to feel a little bit outdated unless Amazon's got some trick up their sleeve. Mm-hmm. But for all these clone devices, well, they're hopelessly at sea because they're going to need to go and convince a company like mine or Greg's or NBC and say, it's also worth your time to develop for our platform. And we're going to sit back and say, actually, show us why that matters. Show us how you're going to reach. Show us a marketing plan that gets us to enough scale to make it worth our while. And so what you'll start to see then is some content companies will go with one, some will go with another, but you won't have that critical mass, and therefore they're going to have a real tough time distinguishing themselves in the consumer's eyes to show they've got a competitive offer.
Excellent. Let's stay in the mobile space. There's a whole,
So long.
3 of us have spent a lot of time in the mobile space. There's a whole bunch of talk now about localized content and ad support, relevant content. I know, Greg, you spend a heck of a lot of time on Foursquare, checking in, checking out, where you're going.
I was trying to check in here, but it's not listed as a.
And
enough Foursquare
is there
here.
any content-related play with these sort of things, or is it just really just goofy fun?
Oh, for me, it's a lot of goofy fun. Well, it's so. Foursquare's
Explain what Foursquare is, because I don't even know if half the audience even knows.
So Foursquare is an application that lets you check in to various locations. You get points for checking into locations. You can see what friends of yours are at those locations. You can compete with them for points. You get badges if you've gone out 5 nights in a row, or if you go to certain places.
You're the mayor.
Yeah, I'm the mayor of pretty much every restaurant in and around 1515 Broadway. It's a lot of fun, and people kind of play this as a game for fun. But what's interesting is they've started to do deals with media companies, and I think the first one they announced was with Bravo, where you can get, I don't even know more about this than I do, but you can get badges for certain locations that people on Bravo shows frequent or go to, right? So again, is it revenue creating or is it marketing? I mean, that's what you guys do.
I'll tell you this, just whether it's Gowalla or Foursquare, there's several companies.
Gowalla's another one, just like
it. But it's a very interesting marketing platform. When you think about if you're trying to, create some, pull to a certain area, but also once you're there, you get something that maybe then you can go redeem someplace else. There are a lot of ways in which that can work. And so, yes, we've seen Bravo use it in a marketing capacity, but I will say that we're seeing more and more brands. We're talking to several about how to make this a part of something else that you're doing. We're an entertainment marketing firm, so if you're perhaps associated with a film, is there something then when you go to see the film that then allows you to earn something while you're there. And if you earn over a period of time, does that mean you redeem it for something else? So I think you'll start to see a real big marketing push here. I'm not quite sure on the content, but in a sense that is the content.
Yeah.
It is, you're playing something, and it allows you actually to, socialize and communicate with other people that are doing it. You do feel like you're part of something that you need to keep up with. And I think those are all key points that brands want to touch on.
Yeah.
And so I see it as a great marketing platform.
If you go to a venue more than anybody else in the system, you become the mayor of that venue. And so when you go to a bar or a restaurant, you check in, you can see who's the mayor. You can oust them by going more than them. What individual bars are doing, I think primarily in New York's Lower East Side, but throughout the country, what individual bars are doing is saying, if you're the mayor of this bar, come and show me on the application, I'll give you a free beer.
Yeah.
And so people compete for that by going to the bar. The really interesting next step is, well, how do you scale that, right? Because that's, the person who owns the bar deciding that. How do you do that with the Gap? How do you do that with Coke? How do you do that? You get a free Heineken if you go to the bar. And that's what a lot of companies like this are working on. And what's interesting is, Foursquare is a great example of this, but what really, I think, tipped the scales for them was the metaphor of checking in. And for those of us, the
It's cluttering my Facebook feed.
well, I try to keep my stuff off of here. But for veterans of the mobile wars, like the whole notion of location-based services, and I wasn't a very big believer in, what do you do with this? The concept had always been, well, something follows you around wherever you go, and your friends could always see where you are. By turning that on its head and saying, well, no, it's not about that. It's just about checking in, and I can choose to check in nowhere, or I can choose to check in one place, and I get stuff for checking in. It creates a currency, and an ecosystem that you can build that in. I just read this morning, I think, that Facebook is going to start allowing people to check in. They're going to make that data available to application developers. Your Facebook page is going to look like,
Well,
I think there's other pieces to it too, just in some of these services where, yes, you check in, if you become the mayor, yes, you win something, maybe you can, yes, you get the beer or whatever, but one of the things that I've been asking, and I've talked to Foursquare Gowalla, but how do we track that after that? I mean, there's that whole piece too. It'd be great if you can accumulate these things, but then once you say, okay, I've now earned enough points, or I've checked in enough, I'm the mayor, I can go redeem this for something. How do we know that actually happens? And that's the other piece, which, requires some further thinking. But I think they're onto something, and there is a play there.
certainly the promise of mobile has always been super local, right? That's something that
you're walking by a Starbucks and your phone.
That was always the hypey pitch back 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Finally, you got this conjunction, a couple of critical things: geolocation technologies, mobile phones that are actually fun to use, that are more playful, and the web browsers that actually show you decent web experiences, high-speed data. So there's enough critical mass there where you can actually start to deliver those experiences. But to Greg's point, they're not the experiences we thought. We thought they would be things like W Cities, which was going to be a kind of Zagat guide or whatever. Hey, Yelp Mobile is kind of that, and it's pretty good, right? But this experience, whether it's Foursquare, Gowalla, or CauseWorld, or many other such things that are popping up, they're kind of proliferating. They're rather different. They're not just about access to information. They're about you putting your thumbprint on that information, you making your personal mark. In a way, one of the coolest things about Foursquare to me is the idea that you can kind of hang virtual Post-it notes in a space. So you can say, hey, the blonde waitress is really cool. So you go to a place, you're like, oh, cool, somebody before me, said that. Or if you're nice to the bartender, he'll give you an extra drink or whatever. That idea that somebody else can leave a comment for you hanging out there is really cool, like virtual Post-it notes all over the world. So what we're talking about here is engagement on a level that traditional media has never been able to do, and honestly a lot of web publications are unable to do. That's a chance for the opportunity to really participate and really kind of help make the experience happen. Obviously, we all know this from social networks on the web, but this ultra-local rendition is something that's appropriate to a mobile phone. We're certainly inspired at my company by a thing that Oprah said to us a year ago, which was, engagement is the new entertainment. That was her watchword for us as we started to plan out this channel. So we're always trying to think about high engagement points in our content, in our brand, but also in the brands of the sponsors who we work with. And it's certainly found that we have an audience that's willing to do that. So in a mobile context, engagement is ultra local. In a tablet context, well, engagement might be very, very different, right? A tablet context, Apple scenarios that you're going to buy 2 or 3 of these things and leave them around the house for anybody to pick up. So it's sort of like this shared media thing, and it'll probably personalize to you or to someone else, and so then all the offers on that device, in all the media, because it's a multimedia terminal, will tailor to whoever that household member. So that's about sub-segmenting a household, which is brand new terrain, right? No one's ever gotten there before. I believe that's kind of where Apple's heading with tablets in the household. That leaves the question, so what's the general web for? You know, and how is that going to evolve? And there's also some segmentation plays happening there.
Who needs that?
Yeah, that old internet thing on a computer.
But you know, one of the questions is, I'm curious, what does the bar think about that, right? I mean, you flip it on the other side. So it's good for us to play around, but how's it driving business back to the location as well? And you know, and where is that going, right?
And your
I think
point on
that's-
tracking it is critical,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
reporting, which is a
Sure.
whole other, it's a whole,
I-
and that's not there yet, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, let's stick on social networks a little bit and get back to content and consumers. What are you finding for content discovery with your consumers? Is search engine optimization still so critical and important for just driving your content consumption, or is it more now driven through social networks and Twitter and things like that?
Search is like getting a listing in the TV guide, right? It's essential that you search out there, but it's just part of the nuts and bolts of your business these days, I think. We're seeing interesting things happen in social media. Made a huge advance there in the past year, and we're starting to see significant amounts of traffic. So those social sites are now routinely in the top 10 referring sites to our websites.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing more traffic come in through social sites. I mean, without question. I agree that search engine optimization is still critical, right? And that still is, I mean, talk about these.
But you think consumers are now starting to trend away into more using social networks for discovering content?
I do both. I mean, I don't think it's as much, well, I used to search on Google, and now I'm going to see what my friends are saying on Facebook. It's more that I'm still searching for stuff on Google, but I'm also getting, I mean, look, email is still a big, refer, right, with people emailing links. The notion of sharing it on a social network, whether you're putting it on Facebook or you're putting it on Twitter or Tumblr, is to a degree replacing that. For some demos, not so much for all of them. So whereas you used to see, I would email it to 10 people, and then they would all click on the link, and then you saw that. Now maybe it's 100 people, right? But it doesn't. I don't think people are not. I don't know, but I don't think people are using Google less frequently, or I say Google search less frequently. But we certainly are seeing a lot more traffic coming in those other places.
For word of mouth marketing, social media is incredible, right?
Yeah.
Because your
Yes.
friends are endorsing it with their own identity. They're saying, this is something I want to associate with. You guys should check it out too.
We had a great example last week. State Farm's one of our clients, and we were helping them to reach young adults. And so we partnered them with OK Go, a band that did a video.
You did the sponsorship for that?
Yes, we did
Sweet.
that.
I saw that.
So, yes, that's us.
No, it was great.
That's us.
It was great.
And, but part of actually, talking about this process was how are people going to discover it and find it. And one of our partners in the marketing arm is Fanscape, social media word of mouth marketing company, and they created a great plan. And 80% of the views, it was over 6 million on Monday. I don't know what it is now, but came from social media and driving a strategy of how to discover that content.
How did you get to hooking them up with, I mean, the video for the new OK Go video, they're the ones who all did a video where they were running, dancing on treadmills, did another one where they were all doing it. This is a giant Rube Goldberg machine that they did, and I mean, it's an incredible video.
It's incredible.
But it went crazy viral.
Crazy viral.
And I mean, I can't imagine, I mean, how do you, and at the end of it, there's an ad, or there's a billboard.
It starts out with a little, truck that has the State Farm logo, and
Right.
at the end, and actually, this was a perfect matching where the band was looking to do something different. There are challenges on the cost of creating videos these days, as anyone knows from the record labels, and this was a way for them to do what they wanted to do, but also create a great opportunity for a brand that was trying to reach this demo. And, it could not have been more successful. It's, it's been on the homepage of Yahoo, every, news, station has covered it. I think CNN just did a big piece on it. Rolling Stone's doing a piece on it next month. But, just of how, content and brands can work together to kind of, create win-win scenarios. But just from the pure discovery of this video, it was totally driven through a social media strategy.
So Greg, that doesn't make you nervous being MTV that someone else could break a video like that?
Well, I mean, I think videos break Videos break online all the time. Right. And look, I mean, we're one of the places where the video was. I mean, we had it. It's funny. We also had it highlit, all over the place because it's an amazing video. The video business in terms of music videos has certainly changed. In terms of breaking videos on air. I mean, we absolutely do that. We do that. They're big. It's a couple times a year. It's a big deal. It's a giant artist. It's not sort of, with the same, so many people that just take something and put it out on YouTube. A lot of what we do is curate, and we know our audiences, we know what they like, and we know what's out there, and we know what they want, and we see stuff that's early. The thing about the OK Go video is that went from nothing to millions and millions and millions of views in a day. There's no early for that. Right, that just is an instant hit.
Well, and they constructed the thing deliberately to go viral, right? So they made this outrageous, they took a whole building and turned it into a machine, right? So it's fascinating on its own. You're like, how did they do that? There's a great buzz factor involved. I think that's a really key note. This band has taken it upon themselves as their responsibility to construct a social media strategy. They're not dependent on MTV. They're not dependent on a label. They're not dependent on even a marketing company, really. They're saying, no, we're going to make a product that works on its own. It's going to be successful. It's going to find an audience, and that's going to bring benefit to the sponsor. That's a pretty big deal because I think in this discussion about social media, it often revolves around, well, how do big media companies deal with social media? The answer is we're all participating, of course, as we have to. You got to be present on these platforms. But there's an opportunity now for individual creators to foster a direct connection to an audience. And that's a profound shift that simply didn't exist in traditional media, where a creator, whether it's an author of a book or a producer of a show or a talent on a show, they can directly communicate with an audience and relatively quickly establish a following in the hundreds of thousands or millions. If you look at, for instance, who's using Twitter successfully, it's all personalities. That's unprecedented. There are no examples in the past of people having direct communication with their fans and their audiences and so forth. What follows from there is an extremely exciting opportunity, perhaps as soon as this year, which is direct publishing, straight to audiences as well. And you're starting to see trends in that direction. Folks at HP have a print-on-demand business that's available to authors who can build their own following, strike their own deals with companies like Davie Brown, and then get out there and put that content in the hands of their audiences. So this is kind of unprecedented. I think it's a fascinating thing. I think it's also incredibly empowering for creative people.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, MagCloud in HP, there's also a client. They were part of the Oscars the night before party and created a custom, magazine around that event that, could only be purchased online. It's a collector's item, but just to that point, it was immediate publishing coming straight from what was happening within the party. So pretty unique experience, and also the chance for the consumer to touch and hold something that, that not everyone could. But it was not, the only way you could get it was through the website and through Variety.
Before we started here, I was chatting with Greg outside, and he said a really interesting point, which is, today it's less about what's your mobile strategy or what's your social media strategy. Instead, we are cross-platform publishers, and we have to be active on all of these things. And each one has its different advantages. Each medium or each format, I guess, has its own advantages that you want to think through carefully. But as a media company, we're challenged with the task of thinking through our audience, migrating across all these platforms and presenting them with the right proposition. Well, here's what happens in that kind of an environment. Every media company is competing with every other media company. So back in the day, not too long ago, movie studios worried about what other movie studios were doing, and TV broadcasters worried about broadcast. They didn't even worry about cable that much. We certainly didn't worry about what game companies were doing, or for God's sake, what a social media company was doing. Today, you have to think about all of that stuff. You have to pay attention to everybody, because your proposition, whatever it is, your experience, engagement, brand, content, whatever it is competing with all that stuff, and in some cases, individual creators like OK Go, who are also vying for attention and awareness. That's why engagement's so important, and the ability to measure engagement metrics, which are elusive, those haven't been properly defined. They're vitally important to companies today and to individual creators who want to connect with an audience, because you're really out there kind of battling it out on all of these platforms for time and attention and some level of engagement with a fan who's bombarded with different propositions. So anything that can cut through is a significant success. That's why that OK Go thing was so powerful last week.
Well, also it was, when you think about it, And like I said, there was a strategy going into it about how to distribute this using social media. But more importantly, you just had to think of who are they trying to reach, and who is the consumer, and what are they doing. And that's the other piece. Yes, back in the day, we didn't have these platforms, and you didn't have to consider them as competition. But when you look at them today and how much time is being spent by the consumer on these platforms, and let's just face it, kids are spending a lot more time on social media than they are with television or even going to films, and they're definitely walking around with cell phones. You're forced to kind of, think that way moving forward on whoever you are. If you have any product that you're trying to get in front of that demographic, and now moving forward, it's expanding beyond obviously young adult. Everyone's getting involved. So it's just a whole way of thinking that everyone has to apply. We do the same thing. Davy Brown is part of a larger company called the Marketing Arm. The Marketing Arm was initially a kind of promotions company, but saw that there was a need to have an entertainment division because there was a lot of opportunities and ways to do promotions and activate around that. So they brought in Davy Brown. Just a few years after that, they brought in Ipch, which is a mobile marketing company. Most recently, we've created a partnership with Fanscape, which is a social media and word-of-mouth marketing company. So it's, to your point, we're all having to kind of look at this in whatever business we're in, because it's where the consumer is going, and how do you best approach that consumer? And where are they going to be? Where are they spending their time? And where are they going to get engaged with you, with your content, with your brand? And let's face it, these interactive devices are much more engaging. And we know with the tablet and other devices coming forward, we're only going to see more of that.
Ryan, from a TV company, there are obvious ways to use that to your advantage. There was an article I think it was in the Times, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, or maybe last month. There's an article about, wouldn't have been last month, about social media and its effect potentially on ratings of shows. They used the Olympics as an example. You might be able to speak to this, but the notion that there had been some initial criticism like, we're going to know who's won and we're not going to, and so why would anybody watch? But what I think one of the theses was that people talked a lot online and on Twitter and on Facebook about what had happened, about what they'd seen, about what was going on, so much so that you sort of had to see it on TV, and there were higher ratings than I think you'd ever had.
I have a question. What were some of the big consumer lessons out of Beijing and Vancouver, which I know you were involved in?
Well, I think we're still compiling the final tally here, but there's a lot of talk about, should you time delay, should you not time delay, and it's not my direct area, but from my understanding, it was a huge success, right? We had tape delay of a large part of the events, and it was still okay, to Greg's point,